Making their way across Australia. Having set off from England in May, Tim Nicholson and Joanne Bowlt have got used to roughing it. Not only is the scenery what you'd expect, but no trip down under would be complete without the country's most famous animal.
We had our first night in the Australian outback, and there are flies everywhere. It's so frustrating. But we had a very frustrating day yesterday. We took a wrong turning and it added 3 hours to our journey, hence we didn't quite make it to the town we were expecting to get to. We also experienced the huge open spaces. We had to do another detour because we realised the road that we were on, there were no petrol stations for 150 miles, so we had to double back and fill up with petrol.
This 1954 Morris Oxford has driven through Europe, North Africa and India. At 240 miles per tank, they've so far filled up with fuel around 60 times.
Sitting on this seat is like sitting on a soft, comfy sofa. It sounds really nice and tempting, but after several hours you really do start to seize up. And when we're driving for about 10 to 12 hours each day at the moment, get from one place to the next, that's quite challenging.
Having arrived in Shark Bay in Western Australia, a well-earned rest from all that driving.
There's a dolphin, I've seen a dolphin.
Days like this have been few and far between. But it's soon time to be back on the road.
The lady driving this car has just asked for some help. Her radiator's overheating. Trouble is, you see, these modern cars, there's just too much to go wrong. I've suggested she needs to let it cool down, and it might be her fan that's not working properly.
Having started the long journey across Australia to Sydney, some time off the road to visit a couple with whom Tim and Joanne have much in common.
This is Samantha, and she travelled around the world with Clive and Sheila for 7 years. He wrote a book, 7 years with Samantha, and literally travelled all around the world. And she's in Austin 7, I think. Really very small. And motorbike, wheels.
Clive and Sheila also have a 1950s Morris, but one a little better equipped for the Australian climate. If all goes according to plan, Tim and Joanne will leave Australia in the new year. They hope to arrive in Oxford, New Zealand in February. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today. After driving more than 14,000 miles crossing Europe, North Africa and part of Asia, Tim Nicholson and Joanne Bowlt are making their way across Australia, the penultimate leg of their world crossing.
First of all, we saw kangaroo signs, then we saw lots of them on the road, and you can even eat them as crisps. Very good.
It's day 109 and driving around the southwest peninsula of Australia. A lot of what we travelled through the last couple of days could almost be England. There are hay bales in the fields, rolling countryside. In fact, it's just gorgeous. However, we know very well we're not in England. It's much, much hotter. It's glorious blue skies. And we keep driving through these ginormous carry tree forests. The scale's totally different to Britain.
Everywhere they've been, the journey and the car has caught people's attention. This 1954 Morris Oxford is just one of 100 left in the world. Despite the distance and changes in weather, the car's coped remarkably well, but they've had to stay aware of the hazards and hassles that each country has in store. In this case, it's bushfires.
Good job we're not too close to that one. Looks like it's gone a bit out of control. We burn off the bush, the lower level, so that later on in the summer they don't have really big fires that are out of control, but that one looks pretty serious already.
A stormy night under canvas. Not the best accommodation they've had, but not the worst either. Earlier on this trip, Tim and Jo were forced to sleep in the car.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. We're in southwest Australia. We're testing out our new tent. It's blowing an absolute gale outside. We're just hoping that the tent doesn't blow away. It's not quite the weather we were expecting for Australia, but there we go.
Time for another unusual experience.
We're in Kalgoorlie, which is a mining town in Western Australia, and this is Lee, who runs a brothel in Kalgoorlie, and Lee has very kindly allowed us to stay for a couple of nights here. So this is our accommodation for 2 days.
And we do a little bit of naughty stuff here. The naughty boys like you.
Back on the road and time to update the diary. All the money raised from this trip will go towards the Red Cross. The end may be in sight, but they still have miles to drive across Australia before they can leave for New Zealand. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today. 50 years old and with 8 countries behind her, this Cowley-built car is finally showing the strain this trip is having on her.
14,000 miles into the journey, and we've had the first problem that we can't easily resolve. Florence wouldn't start this morning. We had to jump start her, and we bump started her as well. Could either be the battery or possibly the alternator. We'll have to try and get it checked out tomorrow. Apart from that, she's fine.
With the car fixed, time to visit one of Australia's best known crops, but this one has an extra special connection.
We're at the Oxford Landing Vineyard.
Tim Nicholson and Joanne Bowlt have lived out of the back of this 1954 Morris Oxford for 7 months, providing them with transport, a place to eat and a roof over their heads. But it's not all driving. Throughout their adventure they've taken time out to see some of the country around them.
The top of Australia! Mount Kosciuszko, 2,228 metres high.
And it's a bit chilly, and we've now got to walk all the way back, and the sun is about to drop over the horizon, so it's going to be dark soon.
With some of Tim's family settled in Australia, this detour was all about finding a bit of his history.
This is what's left of my great-uncle's fishing hut. It got damaged by fire just a couple of years ago, which is a real shame, but the national parks might refurbish it. But we're told that with all the corrugated iron, the tin roofs, that it's a very likely place where snakes are living. So we're a bit reluctant to hang around for very long. It's freezing.
Just as nature intended, time to get clean after all that walking and driving. Sydney at last, after driving all the way from Western Australia. But that means it's now time for the car to take a wash.
We're cleaning the car in great detail because tomorrow we're fundraising at the largest shopping mall in the Southern Hemisphere. She needs to look good. But more importantly, we're about to put her in a container to ship to Auckland, and apparently their quarantine regulations are just as strict as Australia's.
Throughout the trip, Tim and Joanne have been collecting money for the Red Cross. They hope to raise £10,000. Alistair Fee, BBC South Today.